Welcome to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Here we provide tips, tools, and resources to help law enforcement officers succeed at work and in life. I'm your host, Michael McIntosh, retired sheriff and current bureau chief in the Denver metro area. This is part 2 of a 3-part series with Dan and Christine Brite. Dan has a 23-year career in law enforcement and is currently in charge of the wellness program at the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. Christine is a 20-year law enforcement veteran, currently serving as a sergeant in investigations, also with Douglas County. Today, Dan and Christine share the struggles of returning to work and finding the purpose that would ultimately lead them to support agencies throughout the United States.
How long were you guys married before this incident happened?
13 years.
Okay, I'm so glad you answered that.
And now we're celebrating our 20th this year.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So you guys experience this and you go through this. How were you reintegrated back into the sheriff's office?
Yeah, that's a real good question. I wanted to go back to the impact unit because not only was I comfortable with that unit, but I wanted to try to get back into that environment in hopes that all the mental health issues would just kind of go away, right? It was my way of trying to avoid dealing with the emotions by getting back into that real busy work. What I quickly learned was when they ran out the door to go handle stuff and I was left behind, like that tore me up even worse. I couldn't handle it. I wanted to be out there with them, right? Helping them out, covering their backs, like doing whatever I could, but I had to stay in the office, and that went against my whole values and beliefs in my adulthood, right? Because I was a go-getter, like, let's go take care of business, go do work, let's do whatever we got to do. And when you can do that and you finally realize it, it sucks. And so that was the other component that really contributed to all the downward spiral of the mental health issues. And then, the sheriff came to me. I think I may have relayed to someone in command that, like, I don't know if I can stay in this position. And then eventually the sheriff came to me and said, hey, what do you think about a wellness program? I, at the time, had no idea what that meant. I was still, that was 2019, so I had been going through some therapy, so I was, I think at that time, making very little progress, but at least I was going. At that time, I didn't know what a wellness program meant, but I'm like, yes, I got to do something different. Quickly learned that was going to be my passion. He gave me a clean slate, said, build it as you see fit. And as I was going through my own healing process and learning things, like, this could totally apply to just about everybody else in this agency, right? So kind of taking pieces from my own experience and injecting me into the wellness program, and then just kind of listening to what others needed or wanted and bringing that into the wellness program, just kind of made this program like morph into a really successful part of law enforcement. And then seeing that, and not only being humbled by it, but then realizing, why is this not applied to every other agency? Mm-hmm. And so eventually International Association Chiefs of Police reached out and said, hey, do you want to be a subject matter expert and help other agencies build wellness programs? Absolutely. Like, I'm all in. And so now, as a side gig, right, aside from DCSO, I help other agencies build wellness programs, based off of best practices and based off of my own experiences and my own education of going through the master's program of how responders can take care of their own mental health. And so it's just kind of, I don't know if the sheriff just randomly came up with a wellness program or if they had that in the back of their mind for a while, but just that simple transition into a position like that was a life changer for me. I don't know where I would be if they had either kept me in impact or said, we can no longer keep you on as an employee. I have no clue. But I know where I am now, and I'm extremely grateful for it. I realize not every agency has the ability to take injured cops and put them into positions like that. But if they do, like, it is absolutely necessary for that to happen, right? That, some agencies, small ones in the rural areas, they don't have that kind of flexibility, so it's a little bit difficult for them. But the bigger agencies, absolutely, they have the ability to do that.
So there's a program that both of you are going through. When did that actually even come about? Not for you, but I had never even heard of that program until you guys started going through that. Mental health in law enforcement, obviously the need for it has been there, since law enforcement existed. But trying to break down that stigma, and realize that it's okay is still a struggle in law enforcement. It's still a struggle amongst first responders and in the military. We're definitely getting better. But when did that program come about that's specific for responders?
That was brought to our attention by Dr. Sarah Metz. She owns Code 4 Counseling. Her and her husband, Nick Metz, approached us and said that they were wanting to build an academic program of a level of master's through the Colorado State University Global. So it was kind of an online, and it was going to be psychology specific to first responders and military. First one of its kind in the nation, and she was going to build it, and she wanted us to kind of be the first to go through it. And we, Dan was 100% on board at that time. I had looked at it a little differently because I wasn't as passionate at the time about, mental health specific to first responders. I had a passion with the families because I am a wife. I have children of first responders. We need that support from our family members also. And I said, okay, let's do it. I guess we're both, we want to punish each other for something. And so that's when we started, and it's taken off. I've loved every minute of it. I think Dan has as well. We are now in our internship, so it does provide real world work. Though it won't give us licensure, it gives you a foundational knowledge base of first responders. It doesn't have to be a first responder that joins. We have plenty of other therapists or psychologists that just want to go through it to have that culturally competent basis. And it's different. It's unique. We could apply our own experiences to it. And being, cops for now over 20 years, not that we've seen everything, but we've seen enough to be able to help other younger first responders go through the struggles that maybe we've seen or we've gone through ourselves.
And the other important piece of this program is just across the nation, there is a severe shortage of culturally competent therapists, meaning that therapists that understand our profession and how we deal with stress and can relate to the things that we go through. Huge shortage. I do know, as I help other agencies across the country, their states have nothing in place. Colorado, we have a lot in place. And for this program to create, these culturally competent therapists, and then they go out into, across the nation and work with other agencies, like that's what we need, because what we're coming up against is if a responder with a traumatic event goes to a therapist, that doesn't understand our profession or has no experience with our profession, and we tell them about the child death or the murder or some violent crime that happened that we responded to, and we start talking about that in detail, there has been occasion where the therapist ends up crying, and now as a cop, we're there. The roles have now switched. We're there,
Right.
consoling them when it should be the other way around. And so that is the other huge piece of really changing our culture in this profession is getting access to those kind of resources. And that's why this program is so awesome, because it helps. It's going to take time, but it helps with getting more culturally competent people out there to help our responders out.
When I when I look at the program that Douglas County currently has, the wellness program that they have you seen any other agencies that have like programs that are doing things to the level that Douglas County is?
Yeah, so Denver PD has one. South Metro Fire Rescue has a really good one. That's it for Colorado. Aurora PD.
There's very few, and I think that might. I mean, I think there's a variety of reasons as to why that might be. I think Douglas County is so unique because Dan has networked and partnered with so many different entities that we have a plethora of resources. And it's not just for the first responder, it's for their families, it's for their children, it's for anything if that first responder needs support, a specific support, we're going to find a need for it, or we're going to find a way to get that to them. Mm-hmm. And though that, and I know Dan also works with, South Metro and Aurora, and it's not something that he hides. He wants to share this with everybody. So what is also very amazing is that many times the smaller agencies come to Dan and say, help, we need help with, building a peer support or building some kind of wellness, or where should I go? And I think that speaks volumes, though they may not have something in place, they know who to go to. And that's really what we're about, is just pumping this information out and seeing if it sticks with all of our first responders. And just being in internship for we've been in this program for a couple of years, and we've been able to actually do clinical sessions with folks of the first responder world, and it feels like it's finally catching on. And it's going to take a while because we've been so embedded for so long of rub some dirt on it, you're going to be fine. And there is there's a piece that we're going to say that at some point in time. Like, we just need to move on. But for the most part, our tragedies that we see are not our own, somebody else's. And that's unique. That's unique, that you just can't turn on and off all the time. And so they're finally catching on and realizing maybe I do need a little bit more extra help.
Yeah. I think to your point, in the Denver metro area, it's not uncommon now that, if you run across law enforcement, that there's talk about mental health resources. And I look at, like, It's a Calling Foundation and Revital, both Colorado grown organizations that are really focused on the mental health aspect of first responders. And I had no idea that IACP has kind of picked that up, and has asked you to be an SME when it comes to that, because that's a great organization that can help spread that through, not just the United States, but internationally, right? And it's critically important that that things like that get into the National Academy, the FBI National Academy, which is another international type of organization, where there's law enforcement leaders,
Mhm.
much like the IACP, where there's law enforcement leaders that are taking these concepts back to their agencies to make sure that in law enforcement we're focused on this mental health component. Um, how how do you guys see this kind of moving forward? What is a couple of the things that still yet need to be done as we start to move the ball, in the direction that it needs to go? And, or what are some of the obstacles that you are seeing right now that prevents us from moving the
Yeah.
ball in the right direction?
There's, from my perspective, there's at least two huge barriers. One is the stigma that we've talked about. Not only does society have a stigma around mental health, but it's even exacerbated in this profession, right? That will always be a battle. Our wellness program is fighting that stigma on a daily basis. Although I think we've done a good job of minimizing the stigma, it will still exist. It will always exist, but you have to continue to fight against it, right? To keep it pretty low. The other part of that is leadership, understanding the importance behind it, and there are a lot of studies out there that I've found that have shown that when you invest in mental health, your decision making is better, right? Your ability to react to certain situations is better. To cope with stress, obviously, is better. And then also the correlation between mental health and physical injuries. When you address mental health, the physical injuries will also decrease, right? And we've seen that within our own agency. We've had a huge decrease in our work comp injuries, right? We've seen our. I think one of the reasons why DCSO doesn't have that negative spotlight on them, why our guys and gals do such great work, is because they have the ability to take care of their mental health and they can make better decisions, and they don't have excessive use of force complaints, right? And they're not they're not relying on substance abuse all the time to help cope, and they have all these programs in place to take care of them when they've dealt with all those traumatic events in their career. That's the big piece, is really to get leadership to bite off on. These are this is it's not give them more training or defund the police or anything like that. It's let's address their mental health, because when you address their mental health, they're going to go out there and do a great job because they have the mental capacity to do that great job. When all you're dealing with is a trauma in your head, you can't make effective decisions on the street. And that's usually when the cell phone cameras come out, right? And then an agency is in the news for something horrible, and it's just a big black eye. How we overcome that is, let's make mental health accessible. Let's minimize that stigma and allow your people to access that mental health and to take care of themselves. That piece right there, I think, is the biggest barrier.
I agree. I think leadership is by far the number one barrier that we see, and that may be because we have sometimes older leaders in the mix that didn't grow up with this and they don't really understand this new kind of culture. And so when leaders go through classes that Dan teaches or IACP teaches, and they start learning about this, people watch, and your officers are going to start seeing that, and they're going to start catching on. I think another piece for me, I know that I would like to see in the future is more mental health training and education through post. Right now, how many hours do they get? 10 around 10 hours or so.
Yeah.
It doesn't dive into too much of the aspect of these are cadets, so to tell them that they're going to see some tragic things in their life, they don't really understand what that means until they're in it. And so I personally would like to see more time and education built around the cadet part of it as they're growing up. If it's embedded in the beginning, we can start seeing these new troops becoming leaders, and then it's going to start shifting in kind of the thought process.
Absolutely. And then you guys also do in-service wellness training as well, right?
Yes.
To make sure that you're keeping that in front of, typically it's patrol or jail staff that are going through that, but actually I guess all commission go through through the wellness training. Do you think right now that there's enough time set aside for you and the wellness program to help move things in the direction that you would like to see them go?
Yeah, kind of like on the fence. I think we do. We get, at least for Chrissy and I, we get 5 or 6 hours there in the Cadet Academy. We get 5 hours during in service. And then throughout the year, we hold more psychoeducation classes to get access to like the civilians and, to bring them in and teach them as well, right? As we want to do the whole agency, not just the commissioned. Could there always be more? Absolutely. But I also understand we're competing against so many other responsibilities and requirements, right? That I think for us right now, what we have is acceptable. I would always love to have more, but I think for us at our size of agency, I do know that's way more than the vast majority of the agencies provide.
I think there's a good balance. What Dan does really well is when we have peer support contacts, we actually have stats that we build throughout the year as to why. Nothing to break confidentiality, but why did we contact you? Why did we see you? Was it something about financial problems, or was it criminal? We try to take the pulse of the agency, and then we take that data and we use it for the next year. So one year we focused on sleep hygiene and making sure that people had enough sleep in their routine. One of the years was substance abuse, and we really honed in on substance abuse. So it's going to vary for each agency, and I think it's important to be able to teach them what they want and need rather than, we're just going to teach resiliency. Because a lot of these strategies can't necessarily be taught in a 2-hour group setting, right? Because again, there's stigma attached to it. So if I have a guy next to me that's like, this is stupid, I can't believe we're here, I'm going to start doing this group think with you and go, yeah, it's silly. I shouldn't be here either. And then all of a sudden you have this. So we need to make sure that it is specific to their needs. And I think that has been helpful over the years.
That's great. I didn't even realize that you were doing that, but that makes so much sense because it ties it back to what they're actually experiencing, what they're going through. And it's inevitably not going to be the exact same thing that another agency is going through.
That's all for this week's episode of the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Be sure to come back next week as we wrap up with part 3 of this series. Dan and Christine will share the steps first responders can take to get the help and the support they need. We invite you to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to visit our website at leleaders.com for our free guide, 10 questions to consider before putting in for your next promotion. Until next time, stay safe and remember, you have the power to make a difference. Thank you for your commitment to law enforcement. We're honored to be a part of your journey to success. Let's elevate our call to service together.